Welcome to the Mind, Body and Soul Show with artist, author and personal development coach John Morris. Inspiring, motivating and educating you on your journey to find balance in the craziness of day-to-day life. Learn from and listen to a man who has a wealth of life experience, from business to bodybuilding, artist to author, and has learned to deal with his own physical and mental wellness. But that's not all. Each week, John will be joined by guests from around the world and all walks of life, where they too will share their knowledge and expertise. And now, we welcome you to today's episode of the Mind, Body and Soul Show with your host, John Morris.
Okay, folks, we are live and welcome to the Mind, Body and Soul Show, where we help you find balance in the craziness of day-to-day life. Boy, we have got an awesome show for you today because I'll tell you all about that momentarily. If you're brand new to this particular show, you might be wondering, who is this crazy long-haired guy dressed up and whatnot? I'm John Morris. I'm an artist, author, and personal development coach, among many other things. And I'm a student of many things as well. But that aside, I'm really excited today because autumn is starting to really take shape here in sunny Scotland. The sun is actually just setting here as we're talking, and it's really ironic that my guest today and I, we're going to be talking all about starting new, starting fresh, beginning a new way of life. And that's really what autumn and the changing of the seasons really is. My guest today is definitely no stranger to this platform at all, and I'm going to let her tell you all about herself momentarily. But in fact, let's bring her in right now, shall we? So let's bring in Dr. Natalie. Natalie, how are you doing today?
Oh, it's a peachy day.
It's a peachy day. I like that. It's a peachy day.
Well, that's something I picked up in the US, so every now and then I try it out.
I like it. It is a peachy day. It's a bizarre thing. I don't know about for you where you are in Germany, but for us over here, it's unusually warm. It's been very wet over here, but it's been really warm going into this weird autumnal season. How have things been for you?
Well, I wouldn't say it's been warm, but it's been like a roller coaster. Like one day it's chilly and rainy, and the next day it's sun. So it's like I get the feeling that Mother Nature's not quite sure if she really wants summer to end right now.
I can't say I'm surprised because, I mean, it has, even over here, it's been a very mixed summer. We've had some absolutely glorious sunny days over here, but we've had some storms and everything as well. Mm-hmm. And it's been bizarre. And I think that's in some ways reflective of the time in which we're living in as well. That's very unsettled and everything. But before we go any further, Natalie, for the audience maybe that hasn't met you before, I know we've got a new audience that's streaming in now all across the world. Tell us a little bit about yourself and really what it is that you do.
Oh, you're just opening Pandora's box. For anybody who doesn't know me, I will start out by saying what you see is what you get, because that I think is the most important thing in anything. What you see is what you get. And what I mean by that is that, yes, I'm a transformational mentor. Yes, I'm intuitive. Yes, I'm a mom. Yes, I work with the Los Angeles Tribune. Yes, I'm an author and a speaker and all of that. But in the end, it all comes down to one simple thing. And that is, I am me. And I help others embrace and love themselves as well. I call that total transformation or a revolution. And I love doing that because I happen to believe that we're all here for a purpose and that we're all here to showcase our own special gifts. And there's no reason to hide that. There's no reason to live somebody else's life. There's no reason to just exist or survive. But we're here to live out loud. And I always like to say, live your life your way. And it's a journey. You know, there are always challenges that we're here to manage, to handle. And in that, I usually talk about crossroads, small ones and big ones. And I've mastered my own, I've overcome my own. I know how to deal with them, just like John has. And I love helping people get the skills to do the same so that life is not an obstacle or drama or horrible, but it's a challenge every single day that is positive and helps us evolve.
I think that's an absolutely fantastic intro for sure. I love someone who knows what they're talking about and knows who they are, which is brilliant. But with that in mind, I mean, today we're talking all about starting over. And like you said, Natalie, you and I have had, a roller coaster ride, as a lot of life experience, people are, and they go through. For me, I suppose starting over, my definition of starting over is where you leave behind one way of life and begin another. But I'm interested to know right off the bat, have you got your own definition of what you feel starting over really is?
I do. And the more I think about it, the less I like the terminology.
See, I was playing with that one as well myself. Yes.
Yeah, it is. On the one hand, it's one of those common things that we say. It's like, you end a job, you start over at another job. Usually that means that you're starting at a lower level and you need to work your way up, or you leave behind one house and you go to another. The more I think about the term starting over, I don't like it for me because, as I just said, for me, everything is another possibility to grow. And so I don't really think I'm ever starting over. I'm just taking another turn on my evolution. And that might be, I don't know, making it sound pretty, but it works for me. And, when you mentioned it the other day as a possible topic, I was like, interesting. And then I went, interesting. Do I really agree with that?
See, that's the thing, because I'm in alignment with you with regards to that, because a lot of, again, it's like when people talk about starting over, it's like your journey doesn't end, if that makes sense. It's like you continue on with all the memories and all the things that you've got. It's
right.
I don't know. It's does a butterfly ever stop being a caterpillar? It's when you start exploring that, it's like, that one just came to me. But it was like,
Yes.
where does, so I kind of look at it almost like chapters more than anything else.
Yes.
But following on what you were saying there about, life being a journey, and I believe that we are always in transition, that we just continue going on and on. I'm interested to know from your sort of experience as well, why it is sometimes, I've got my own ideas, but why people who know that they need, to go through that transformation, they know they need to go through that change, seem to want to hold on to their comforts, their old way of life, despite it maybe not being healthy and in some ways actually being very harmful to them. Why do you think that could be?
It is what we're used to. It is, number one, what we used to, and we see that. I mean, you're studying psychology right now as well, but why do we tend to marry our fathers or our brothers or our sisters? Is because it's what we're used to and comfortable. And then sometimes I talk to my clients about that too. Comfortable doesn't mean good for me or I enjoy it. Comfortable means it's what I'm used to. It's the same with the weather. There's a certain weather in Hamburg. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't like it hotter sometimes. I'm used to it. So the used to, I think, is crucial. And people have been trained to no longer endorse change. People have been trained that being in a routine and predictable is good. And of course, I disagree with that, but that's our training right now.
And I completely agree, with what you just said there with regards, because I work with so many people around the world, as you do, and I find nowadays that people are conditioned to such, almost like such a response. They're almost conditioned, that the old psychological thing was, you ring the bell and the dogs come running. And I see that so much with people,
Right.
That they say to me, well, the feeling anxious or the feeling depressed or the feeling miserable, and all of it is related to feelings. I'm very specific about that. When they watch the news or they listen to the media or whatever else is there, and you're like, well, if you stop watching this, you stop the correlation? You feel miserable when you watch this. Stop doing this and watch how it changes. It's interesting for sure how people are conditioned.
It's also, that social conditioning, and I always try to I'm not very successful at it in some people's mind. I try to walk the balance because social conditioning is not necessarily, the devil or the bad thing. We all need some conditioning to work in a society.
Yeah.
Okay. There are some rules we need to abide by. But then there's that other level of social conditioning where you're being boxed in. And you and I, we talked on my show about labels. And so I think it's really the social conditioning can be helpful. But if you're stuck in it, and if it prevents you from seeing all the opportunities, I think that's where a lot of people have come to. I was just talking about this earlier. A lot of people have come to believe that there are no choices. So they have opened themselves up to basically be completely indoctrinated. And why? Again, I'm not talking good or bad, but sometimes it's just the easier way to let others make the decisions for you and then complain about it or loving it.
Yeah. And that is really interesting because, for me, you look around, religious systems, you look around political systems, you look around society and things like that. And again, like you say, people complain, they moan and whine about everything. This is, again, it's statistically proven. This is the most comfortable generation of any period in time, and yet they're the ones that complain the most and have the most identity crisis issues of anybody. But I think oftentimes, it is literally, like you said, it's because it's easy to sit there and be told, what to believe, how to practice your faith, how to, respond. I was listening to an audiobook. I forget the author's name, but it was an Australian author, and he was talking about the Taoist approach, from Lao Tzu and even teachings from Confucius and things. And a lot of that really resonates with me and where I'm at this period in my life. Because again, as you know, I spent 2 decades nearly in the religious structure of teaching, of Christianity and things like that. But it was the more and more I saw of the institutionalized believers, the less and less I was, I wanted to be part of it. And then eventually I felt like a sole trader within a business. And it was a very, very strange place. And I was like, is there actually a place for me, in this world now? But then when you start digging a little bit, and this is what I would encourage anyone to do, if you're dissatisfied and, you are someone that's actually hungry to find out, your own place in society, begin digging. There is nothing wrong with saying, well, I believe this for 20 years, but now maybe, I've got new information presented to me. It's like a scientist, you got new information presented to you and you move on. Have there been times for you, Natalie, where you almost felt like an alien in some of these structures?
Well, I would rephrase that question. Are there times when I don't feel like an alien? Because it is, and I think it's something that we work through. On the one hand, yes, I do feel like an alien most of the time because there are so many things on this planet, in this world, that I just look at and I go, what are we thinking? Not to go Bible, but, don't blame them because they don't know what they're doing. But on the other hand, this is a human experience. So for me, and I think it's especially because of how spiritual I am and how intuitive I am, that I need to walk this line between protection and my intuition and all of those gifts, and at the same time living in this world. And I think that's where we sometimes feel like an alien, but once we start embracing that we have both sides to us, then it becomes easier. And, in my instance, it's even easier because I have a child. So, you got to sort of be here in order to raise a child.
I think absolutely. And it's the whole yin and yang, kind of structure where, the yin is all about pushing and forcing it and trying to control. And the yang is more sitting back and being more solemn. And it's finding that balance of almost having one foot in heaven and the other foot on earth. And it's, I think for a lot of people, it's a very bizarre structure. For me, not so much because I work from home. There are months that go by where I don't see another living soul apart from my wife and the cat. It's just the way that, in some ways that my life is now structured, and just the nature of our business. But it's always been, I suppose, interesting when you look at man and society and human beings of how, again, constantly struggling to find that balance for sure. And like you were saying, and that's a whole other topic for a whole other time. But, like you were saying, that there are times that, when you don't feel like an alien. But I want to ask you, for your own walk of life, for your own, I suppose, dharma, dare I say it, your own calling, your own passions, were the times that you knew, hey, I'm on this path right now. I need to change X, Y, Z, and I need to get off this path because this is no longer serving me. By your response, I'm going to say there probably was.
There have been a couple. I call them crossroads. The funny thing is that, I always say I came out the womb and I knew what I was going to be. Mm-hmm. And that is absolutely true. And that means, an intuitive medium teacher in whatever you teach. However, because of social conditioning and because of the experiences that I chose to have in this life, I had at least 2 instances where my body started shutting down on me and said, no, enough. And of course, I'm German. I'm going to claim that right now. I'm German. So I took that as a challenge. I'm like, yeah, watch me, kind of stupid. But that was a phase I had to go through. And then finally it was like, literally, and I know you've had that too, sort of like, this is going to sound woo-hoo, but sort of like an out-of-body experience, mm-hmm. right? Yes. Where you're looking down at this whole situation, you're going, that's really not working, is it? And, watching that going on, like for maybe it was 2-3 minutes, like, this is not working. Been through this like 20 times. It's not really fun. What are you doing? Yeah. And at that point, it got cut. And that happened to me, one time with a job, and pretty much twice in a relationship. And I think that's really important to understand. And your show has the 3 aspects: mind, body, soul. They communicate. So we need to communicate and take all of that definitely into consideration when we do something. Yeah. So those were like, I guess, my little, crossroads wake up moments where I said, okay, I got it. Let's try it a different way. And it worked.
And I think that's, in some ways, that's almost the secret to success. It was how many ways can you try, to get from where you are to where you want to be. Mm-hmm. And I get it. I mean, and I think a lot of people that are watching this, they understand about relationships. When you've entered into a relationship with someone for whatever reason, sometimes it could just be as simple as you want the company. You don't like being by yourself and you want the company. And, you get down the line where you're talking engagement and other things, and you're like, your brain is going, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And you just think, I need out of this. And I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's a very bold step to take that step, to be able to say, and be honest with yourself and the other person. Maybe you wasn't in the relationship for the right reasons, but I think it would be even worse to continue a relationship, if you're not in that place. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people do. What advice would you give? Just while we're talking about this, it's not in my notes or anything, but what advice would you sort of give and offer to somebody that's in that position where they're maybe thinking, I've been in this relationship, I'm not certain that this is right for me, but I'm terrified of, taking that step to end it? We're asking the big questions today, folks.
the energies, because I'm doing a training for some of my clients right now, and I actually addressed that today in one way or another. In my personal opinion, it has all to do with the way you know and love yourself.
Yeah.
And that is not a long-winded answer, but it is very simple. If you understand that you're here to live your life, then whatever else happens in your life is something that you choose and that you're co-creating. So you always have a choice. And at some point, you need to figure out, who does this serve? Or my favorite question, how is it working for you? And if it's not working for you, it's most likely not working for the other. So in instances like that, number one, you don't always have to end the relationship. You don't always have to end it. But you need to take a break. And that doesn't mean physical, but you need to just have time with you so that you can figure out, okay, What am I getting out of this? What am I doing in this? What works? What doesn't work? And once you're clear on what you want, and most people aren't, then you can go to the other person and you say, okay, this is not working. This may be working. You must express it though with love, because you're not trying to be mean or anything. I mean, some people, but generally you're not trying to be mean. You want everybody to benefit. And like you just said, it doesn't help anybody to be in a relationship with me if I'm not happy with them. They're going to be miserable, trust me. So make sure that you have that conversation and that you lay out the expectations. I think one of the biggest things that we see in relationships is that we assume the other one knows.
Yes.
And most of the time they don't. So well, if you want me to take out the trash, tell me, can you every Friday take out the trash? Don't assume I know and get upset if I don't. That's sort of my answer.
It's one of the biggest things. I know you and I have talked so many times about this, that one of the biggest issues that I find with couples is communication. And we're not talking, sometimes, 2 or 3 years that people have been married. We're talking 25, 30 years that people haven't learned how to communicate with. Because again, I just feel coast to coast and around the world, across the 7 seas, that the majority of people are expected to know. And it's like, you come out of the womb and you're expected to know how to live. You're expected to know how to develop in society, expected to know how to be married or be in a relationship. And, one of the books that I was reading recently, was talking more about love is something that we express. It's always something that we give out, and yes, it should be something that we receive, but your relationship in a lot of ways is reflective of you. More than anything. And I know sometimes that's difficult to understand and sometimes difficult to swallow when you're like, but my husband's being this way, my wife's being this way, my boyfriend, girlfriend's being that way. How is that being loving? It's like, bear in mind, it's about you. You can still be loving, even if he or she is being a nightmare. And I was making some notes there. Again, you mentioned a couple of times already about choices and the choices that we have. And I think, again, going back to conditioning, I think people have reached a point in their life, in terms of their journey or whatever it might be, where they sit there and say, well, I don't have choice. I just have to accept the way my mind is. And one of the programs we're putting together at the moment, again, is addressing those issues where people are saying, well, anxiety is normal, depression is normal, schizophrenia is normal. And it's like, guys, it's not normal, because if it was normal, then it would be a case of, well, you don't have to do anything, to make yourself better. You don't have to address the situation.
Right.
But if you say, well, this isn't normal, it means then you start getting hungry for an answer. You get uncomfortable and you're like, okay. But, certainly for choices, I think, and I know your course is talking a little bit about this. And again, I would love you to go into detail a little bit about this, again, about the choices and the power that we do actually have as human beings.
I think we have a choice every single time that we take a breath, every single time that a door opens, every single time that we want to figure out what dinner is, okay? Those are the easy choices that most people can see. We also have choices that are sometimes harder to see for people. And what I mean by that is that if I had $1 for every time somebody said, I don't have a choice, I have to go to work. Of course, I understand you need to go to work and you need to make money to pay your bills. Been there, done that, still doing that in some ways, okay? Nothing new. What you can change, or where you do have a choice, is number one, where you work, and most of all, your attitude at work. So if you really don't like your job, start looking for a new one. If there's just one person at your job that you don't like, talk to them, avoid them, ignore them. You have choices. Or understand that you're going to this job because you're good at it, you're making good money, you can pay your bills, and you don't have to worry, for example, about being an entrepreneur when you never stop working.
Yeah.
So then you can say, I'm going to go there. And a lot of parents do that, right? They go to work, so they get off at a certain time, and then they can spend time with their family. So their priority is the family. So now you had a choice. I go to work, I can deal with that. I wear my Teflon suit, whatever happens, happens. I do my job, I'm good at it. When I come home, I have nothing to worry about. So life is filled with choices. And I think it's just in the wording that we have to understand it's a choice. You always have a choice. Do you go left? Do you go right? Do you turn on the light? Do you turn it off? And one of the things when it comes to words, I'm very big on words. I used to, when I used to teach history, I used to always make my students look at the origin of a word. And so, for example, in my house, we don't have problems. We have challenges. Okay? It's just a word.
Yeah.
But the word problem is like, oh my God, versus a challenge. Okay, that's an obstacle. I can climb over it. So I think, we've been taught not to like choices, just like we've been taught not to like change. As children, we used to love all that.
Yeah.
So it's that social conditioning, that training that we all have benefited from.
And it's true. I mean, I made a note there as well, that life isn't so much what happens to us, it's how we choose to respond. You like you said, you can have this person, and you and I have both been there, this person that drives you insane at work. It might be your boss, that might be completely unprofessional and a bully and everything else, but it's how you respond to it. You can either make your suffering last a lot longer, or you can decide it's like, well, they're going to be that way. They've obviously got some issues going on, but I can choose how I choose to respond in that. And that I know for me was almost like a revolutionary mindset, for sure, going into that. But when you learn these new things, it's almost like this padlock just springs up and all of this information just bursts forth. It's just amazing and incredible. And I'm sure you've had experiences like that yourself.
Yeah, and I love what you just said, because you just used what I think is the best word possible. You said respond. A lot of people react.
Yes.
And a reaction is an autopilot. It's an automated thing. You don't think about it. You get triggered, you do, right? Versus a response, there's like lag time. It's like, okay, this is happening. What am I going to do about it? And it can be a split second.
Yeah.
But a response allows you to use your self-awareness before you do anything. And I think that's really crucial. Again, it's a word, but it's really crucial because it shows us what path are you on. And, we all have triggers. In a relationship, whether it's friend to friend, at work, sometimes we need to address those triggers. If there are words that you don't like somebody using, why don't you tell them that you don't like it? Because they probably don't know. Then you build the communication, you build the trust. And so, reactions, responses, choices, challenges, it really is all about your perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
And, we both know, of course, Rex Sykes, and, he always says, life is happening for you and not to you. And I always talk about before I met Rex, even I was talking about the football field. Are you sitting in the stands watching it? Or are you down there grabbing that ball, whether it's soccer, football, basketball, I don't care. I'm not that good at sports, but, are you trying to grab that ball and make the decision yourself? Or are you just watching and complaining?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so interesting. And when we come back after the break, folks, we're going to be talking about mindset. We're going to be talking about so many other things as well, and addressing more of what you guys are going through. But we're going to cut to our sponsors for today, and then to a message from the Tribune, and we're back in a moment.
Hello and welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune. Since 1886, our name has been a part of the world of journalism. We have earned a reputation for being a publication that practices integrity, authenticity, and responsibility. For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
Okay, folks, well, we are back, and hope certainly you enjoyed our little promos and all the work that's going on with the LA Tribune as well. Today we're talking with Dr. Natalie Forest as well. We're talking all about starting over, and we've been talking many things. If you've only just joined the show, you need to go back and see all the other stuff that we've been going through, because we've been talking more about I suppose it's led now to the mindset of people, and in a lot of ways the conditioning, like we said, that a lot of people are facing around the world. But Natalie, I want to broach a subject with you that I find very interesting at the moment. So many people, as a result of this COVID pandemic, have lost their jobs or their businesses have closed. And I would love, I suppose, to converse with you about what advice we could give. Told you we're going for the big questions today, but what questions we could give to help them in some ways in their beginning of a fresh start. Your thoughts? I'll have a look at the with your...
Okay. So, number one, I know it's tough. Okay. I know a bunch of small little restaurants, family restaurants that have closed. My heart breaks for them because I'm a big believer in the small places.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why we go to the small places and not big chains. And because of the way that I see the world, which is, my own way, because of the way that I see the world, I would invite people to look at it as an opportunity. I know that can be very difficult. We just talked about how difficult change can be, how we like our routine. And most of the time, we don't necessarily realize a positive opportunity when we're in the midst of it, because we're stressed, we're overwhelmed, we thought everything was settled, and we're so used to that comfort and that sense of being settled. But just the word settled already means that we've settled. So what if the fact that a business closed is actually an opportunity for you to sit down and reflect? And even though it's not the same, but just think about relationships. Over this period, a lot of relationships broke, or finally broke. I probably broke before, and a lot of relationships developed. So since we're all human beings, whether it's business, whether it's life, whether it's health, we're always people, human beings. And if we look at it as an opportunity, even when it's tough, if we realize in this challenging time that this person over there is still here, they're still coming, they're a friend, and I never knew that they were a friend. We build new relationships, and I think very often it's a way for us to take inventory, reflect, and see what else can I do that is in alignment with my purpose, and it will help us grow. But that is not necessarily an easy walk.
No. I think that's a phenomenal answer to a very, very difficult question in a lot of ways. Because again, there are so many, so many stories, so many advice, givers out there, and the so-called experts and everything. One thing that I was struck by when all of this started to, really appear that it was going to be a global problem. Bizarrely enough, and you and I obviously studied history, a lot. And one of the periods of time that I think back to, I believe, was the 1929 Wall Street crash. And people be thinking, why not does that, come back to your mind? Because there were millions and millions of people unemployed in the United States. The crazy thing about it was they were all lined up outside of the, what we call over here the dole office, the job center, whatever you guys have got it across the world, fill in the blank. But the amazing thing was a few people did what Natalie had suggested. It's one word and it's opportunity. And they changed their mindset. Now, I deal with mindset a lot. Natalie, focused with words, so we work really well together. But the interesting thing about it was they changed their mindset that rather than asking, give me a job, give me a job, give me a job, can you give me a job? They started asking themselves, how can I be of service? Because something clicked in their brain and they said, well, if we're all unemployed, then that means that the businesses around our green and glorious land are barely surviving. They're literally struggling to survive. Maybe, I could provide a service to them that could help them, continue on. And that's what happened for a small handful of people. They became of service, they got paid. Well, all these other people were literally starving on the streets. They figured out, how do I become of service? And again, it's that whole mindset shift. You got to be careful how you say that one, folks. You don't want to say that too quickly. Mindset shift is literally the thing that's going to make the difference between your wins and your losses, your successes and triumphs, as opposed to not. And like we were saying, when you're starting over, sometimes you've got to be willing to explore all your options, list all the things that you could do. I know, obviously, when Natalie and I first met, it was 2012, I believe, 2011, 2012. Nearly a decade ago, in fact, maybe even over a decade. I came back from the United States when I was out there as an illustrator, and I came back and my whole world had been pulled from underneath me. I was made homeless by my best friend. I put too much trust in the wrong person. And that really, it toughened me up as a person. It made me angry for a time, don't get me wrong. But it toughened me up as a person to the point I was like, it changed how I saw change. I saw it as an opportunity rather than, okay, what do I do now? Because, when these things happen, and again, Natalie, you can obviously speak to this because you lived in the United States for a long time. A lot of people are, probably the same here as the UK. If anything happens to them, they believe their government or their, community is going to rally around them and they're going to fix everything. And when it doesn't happen, it does change your mindset, and you either thrive and succeed, or you strive and struggle. What were your sort of observations, shall we say, regarding the government, and I suppose in the way they helped, or the lack of, for people that were struggling?
So first of all, I'm going to sidetrack, and I'm coming back. Okay. But I want to sidetrack because those times when we're really down on our knees, so to speak, are moments that I believe we're being asked to reevaluate what we're doing and how we're doing. And most of all, how we are being, because the doing is only half as important as the being. So I think that's number one, that there's, as John was saying, when we had the Wall Street crash or other crashes or the Black Plague, some people became of service, some people saw opportunity, others became absolutely depressed and couldn't handle their attachment to the role that they had. And we still have that today. So that's my bridge back to, how is government helping? So many people in the world today identify themselves through a job or through a role. And when that happens and that piece, that part is taken from them, for example, that old idea of the breadwinner, okay? When you can no longer do that, a lot of people get really depressed. So it's an invitation to see, okay, what does that really mean, breadwinner? And am I just somebody who brings in the money, or am I actually a dad, or am I actually this or that? Rethinking the values. That also has to do with the fundamental setup of any kind of country. There are a number of countries that are community oriented. And that's where a government is a socially democratic government. Let's just call it that. Okay. Then there is at least one big country where it is not about the community. It is based around the idea of I am here to make my life better and the life of anybody I care about. It's a very different approach. It's individualism versus community. And part of why that occurred, especially in the United States, is because of the misunderstanding of an essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson, the first and foremost philosopher of the United States. Completely misunderstood. But because of the title of it, it was like, okay, we're all supposed to do just us.
Yeah.
And that is what is happening on the fundamental ground of the government. So therefore, the government really doesn't per se help as much in those countries that are more individualistic. We've seen, however, that when it gets really, really bad, for example, with the crash and now with the pandemic, that then all of a sudden there's a realization, well, what's going to happen to all these people if we don't help them? And then all of a sudden money is there.
Yeah.
So even though the level of support differs still enormously, you then begin to see that there is, I guess, somewhere subconscious knowing that if the people are gone, we're gone, to put it bluntly. Okay. And so, that then there is some support. The support, of course, in any country of the world can also be misused, where the people who really don't need it get it. And the people who really need it, they don't want to even ask. And I think that goes back to our conversation earlier then about mindset and knowing your purpose and being confident enough to say, no, actually, I need help right now, without feeling bad about it.
I think I think that is so spot on. I really, really do, because, I think, again, it comes back to, I think what we're coming back to a lot today is this social conditioning. The government may lay down the laws of the lands and things, but it's the people around. Like during the wars and everything, First and Second World War, and if you didn't go to fight, regardless if there was a physical, issue with your internal structure and things, you were basically branded as a coward and everything else without people knowing. Same with mental, health disorders and things like that. And I think that's absolutely right, that people have conditioned themselves in such a way that they think, well, this is how it should be, because they're looking for that structure. And again, my personal view is that they've put their search for identity in completely the wrong place. And that's going on more and more as they're getting away from the spiritual core. You're seeing what's going on with people, and obviously you and I have worked with youths for a number of years. I think between us, we've probably got 4 or 5 decades worth of youth work that's there, which is incredible. Think of all the lives that we've impacted. Yeah. But talking about that, shifting our focus a little bit now, because we've been talking more about the adult side and but for youths, what I often found was that they were forced to begin their life over, if I can use that terminology, often out of no fault of their own. It might be mum and dad splitting up. It might be, death in the family, whatever it might be. What kind of comfort and, I suppose, support would you voice to somebody that, a teenager, for example, that's having to, or that's being forced to rebuild their lives? I think that'd be a good way of putting it.
That's a very tricky question, because a teenager has already been socially conditioned in a certain way. If we're talking about small children, they still have that self-confidence, that self-love. It's been sort of slowly but surely being stripped away through society needs and all of that once you get older, once you get into school. So having understood that, it's kind of more difficult almost because they are more innocent usually, if I can use that term, to help them understand that there's a bright side to this. But I would always, and I do always look at the bright side with them and lay out what their new opportunities are. Yes, it's going to be tough. However, this is now your chance to see why you are here. And to me, very important, that you can handle this.
Yeah.
And that you have support. So I think that is sort of the key, and I'm probably not phrasing it as nicely or easily as I wish I could, but I deal more delicately, I want to say, with youth, because they still have so much potential, and I want to foster that potential. Everybody has potential, but they're untapped. They have not been quelched yet, where you need to like grab it and pull it back out.
Yeah.
With the youth, you can really say, okay, look, there's that, and you can sit with them and say, look at the sunrise. And once you start showing them things like that, and allowing them to tap back into their own gifts and talents, and allow them to see that there is a path with that, so that they don't now have to go and work in a factory. I mean, maybe you need to put food on the table, but while you do that, let's make sure you foster your other skills. I think that is really crucial. And with the youth, especially the last couple of generations, we have a much easier time because they're already so open to and for it.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good answer, because it does open up, other areas of discussion and things. I know what I found, probably more so this year than ever before, was when you, in some ways, provide an environment for a youth or a teenager that isn't threatening, that isn't, looking at teaching this religious structure or teaching, what they should think, but rather than teaching them how to think. And that's two very, very different things. I think there's more of an openness that's there now. I think my concern for a lot of teenagers around the world now is the amount of time that they're spending online and on social media as a way to almost hide themselves, lose themselves in their little world. It's something that I'm working on at the moment, is this whole presentation in some ways that this really is the first generation that has had this access to this technology, like TikTok, like Facebook, and so on, so on, so on. I mean, it hasn't been around that long, folks. A lot of people think this has been around since the dawn of time. It hasn't. I remember when it wasn't there. The amazing thing about it, though, is spotting the correlations, which is what I'm always looking for when I'm looking for the root of the problem. And it's when people, talking more about anxiety and their gender identities and this, and this. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Because, 40, 50 years ago, this was not even a spoken thing. It wasn't in the minds of the majority of people. Whereas now, certainly not publicly, whereas now it seems to be at the forefront of everything that's going on. And, the gender identity is a whole nother topic that we've covered on other shows, hours and hours on end. And I think it's exploring that with the teenagers and being able to say, look, help me to see then what it's like from your perspective, and let me help you see what it's like from mine. And then, as we've talked before, you get a different view of the Rubik's Cube, which gives you a more fuller picture. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, I think about this a lot, and I know you and I have talked about it. And I'm sort of almost torn, because on the one hand, when we're looking at the pandemic, for example, whether you believe it's real or not doesn't matter. But the kids seem to have more easily adjusted to wearing a mask. For them, it's like, okay, I'll wear a mask. Okay, it sucks that I can't hug my friend, but, I'll deal with it. Okay, so they almost are made for that. And then we have that escapism, of course. The escapism, I think, is less because of the pandemic or something. It's really more about what's happening at home. And I think we need to look at what's happening at home. And then I think when I grew up, what was my escapism, right? Or my generation? Well, I'm that old. we started going to movies, right? So we went to movies all the time. Or then all of a sudden, yes, I am that old, we had computers, like the very old big ones. We started having those. And then we were like doing all sorts of, we actually still had to write like the DOS code in to get it started. Okay. So it's like, then we escaped into that. So every generation has their escape. And as much as I don't like everything online, I'm trying to adjust my perspective and see, okay, as long as you also still read, that's like the mom in me, as long as you also still read, you can spend some time, but balancing it. And most important, and I think this is where the danger comes in with social media for everybody, not just for young adults, but especially for young adults. It's like, talk about it.
Yeah.
We need at home to be able to talk about it openly and honestly. I mean, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Facebook, there's so much stuff out there. I mean, just because somebody says they bought a Ferrari doesn't mean I believe them. I mean, I can go to the lot and take a picture with the Ferrari, you know? So, but for the young adults, it's even harder. Millennials, they got it. They're like sick and tired of all the advertisement.
Yeah.
But the generation after that, they're still trying to figure out, is this real or is this not? And like you said, they're all taking the same kind of pictures, and we're being just like with Twiggy back, you know, like the shape of the woman, you know, first it's this, then it's this, then it's this. And now we're realizing we all have different forms, but we're all being pushed always in one direction.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, just in general, youth have a harder time. The other thing I want to add, just on a side note, the gender identity, because a lot of people talk about it. And as a historian, I have to say, it didn't used to be a problem. It didn't used to be an issue. Whether it's the Native Americans, whether it's the Romans, whether it is cultures across the world throughout history, there were always people who were born into the body, quote unquote, of what we might call male, but who had more female aspects, and vice versa. There were always those who switched their gender. And it was never a big issue. Now we have more ways of manipulating the body and making it fit what we feel we are. But it's been there throughout ages. Now it's just more visible and more addressed in society, while before, you know, it was just like, okay, and you either hit that person in the basement or, you know, or you dealt with it. But I think it's just one of those things where communication is good.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that are being over communicated about.
No, and absolutely. And I mean, it's interesting you bring up, you know, again, we're talking about gender identity as, you know, as well, that, you know, because that was one of the things that we put out on YouTube this morning. It is a taboo subject, but the science of pornography and the amount that is affecting people. And one of the comments that I'm looking at right now, you know, was saying that porn is destroying young men. It's also destroying young women. And I firmly believe that our society is a reflection of the mind and what's going on and everything that's there. And in some ways, you know, the amount of people that are having these gender identity issues also spells to me how many people and how much time they spend watching sexual content online. And it's the mindset shift. I think, you know, for me, what I observe more than anything is we've got this great tool in technology, but nobody knows how the hell to use it and how to use it properly, you know, as opposed to just taking really cool pictures and everything. You know, it can be used for something more, folks, like building a business and for other things. We're going to turn to a couple of questions here because I'm just, or more statements actually, because I'm just interested in a couple of these things. We've got Facebook user, don't know who this is. So true. You have to speak your truth. What Natalie was saying earlier on, you know, that we are meant to walk in community, but it is also our own journey, and we decide, you know, a lot of, you know, of where we go in our own destination, the majority of the time. Let's see. Okay, apparently we can't help sheep. That's interesting. It's an interesting comment. Any thoughts on that one, Natalie?
Well, we can herd sheep. And I think that's what leaders do, right? We try to awaken the sheep that they can jump over the creek.
That's true. That's true. Okay, same person. This person was just commenting, having a great time here. From a young age, we are conditioned respect to authority, which is bad. That's an interesting one. For me, it depends, I suppose. Natalie's already formulating a plan here. I can see her. I suppose for me, it depends, you know, what authority, you know, where, you know, now respecting authority, I think, is different than being submissive to authority. Natalie, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that we all are an authority in our own lives,
Hmm.
regardless of your age. And I think we need to respect each other as individuals.
Yeah.
So you might say that that is respecting authority. I'm sure that's not what this person meant. So my response to that would be that there has to be a certain amount of authority that I consider guidance
Hmm.
and protection. And that usually comes from the parents. And it's been proven if you're too lenient with children, that that is
Yeah.
also not good. If you're too authoritative, it's not good. So finding that harmony.
All that balance.
So I think that's really important. If you're just being indoctrinated, which of course happens as well,
Yeah.
that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. The final comment that I want to pull up, and this one is one specific. The youth of the West are bored, thus why there is depression and anxiety. And I see that from a lot of people. For me, the reason I pulled this one up specifically is because anyone that's watching this that's struggling with feelings of depression. Now, again, feelings of depression are very different from chemical depression. Chemical depression is where there is an imbalance in your serotonin level, and it needs to be adjusted one way or another. Can you tell I study psychology? I hope so. The feeling of depression, I often found, came from a feeling in myself that my life wasn't progressing the way that I wanted. Now, the bizarre thing was, I was flying high and there was a lot of great stuff that was going on. So you've got to ask, is this a rational feeling? Is this something that really is there? Or is it an irrational feeling? And that's when you start examining everything. Anxiety is born either from a fear of the past or a fear of the future, fear of what could be, fear of what has been. We talk about that in my book, The Battles We All Face. But I completely get that. But that's why, I wanted to bring that up. Boredom, I believe, that could fall into the category of a feeling of depression, because when you're bored, you feel like your life isn't progressing as much. And as a result, that's when you start feeling miserable and everything. Natalie, is there anything that you want to finish up today's show with? Any final thoughts?
I don't know. I've talked about so many things. I think the only thing that comes to my mind, and it's probably something if you've heard me before, it's really important that you know, embrace, and love yourself,
Mhm.
because you are always with you, and you can only control you.
Yeah.
And I mean control in a loving way. You have no power over what anybody else is doing, but you can control your own perspective, your own mindset, your own mind flex, whatever we want to call it. So as long as you know who you are, life can happen for you.
Yeah.
And you will begin to see everything as an opportunity. And so work on that, embrace that, get help if you need it, because it's not necessarily easy if you've been conditioned for a long time to refine that purpose and that inner sense of who you are. But just remember, you're here for a reason. There's nobody like you, which in my world means that you're perfect. So show the world.
That's a really awesome way to end up, folks, and to end the show. It's been fantastic. Natalie, thank you so much for being my special guest today. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that we get to do it again. Folks, you can come and check Natalie out at the LA Tribune. You can find her at Natalie. In fact, where can we find you, Natalie? Let's end with that.
Well, just find me anywhere on social media under Natalie Forest. I'm not hiding.
You're pretty much everywhere.
Absolutely. Well, just like you.
Yeah, well, that's it, folks. You can come and find me at thejohnmorris.co.uk. We've got a brand new website that's up with all simple, quick links that will take you exactly where you want to go. And we want to thank you so much for watching. Until next time, folks, reminding you to find the balance in the craziness of day-to-day life. You've sometimes just got to look no further than within yourself. And then when you do that, all of these things begin to unlock and amazing things start to happen. So have a phenomenal week, guys. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
When we come into this world, we come in with a sense of awe and wonder, believing that things will work out for the best, filled with excitement. We play like children and we enjoy our lives. But as we get older, we find out that everything maybe isn't as rosy as we first thought it would be. Live life long enough and you realise that what once seemed like happy families can very quick turn into Dungeons and Dragons. Have you ever experienced anxiety, worry, or maybe even fear on an insane level? I want to let you know right here, right now, that you're not alone. Everything from homelessness, betrayal by my best friend, abandonment from the people that I thought would have my back. In fact, I've experienced so many different situations, to tell you all would take a very, very long time indeed. But the good news is I'm here to tell you that, well, they've left their mark on me. I've come through all of them. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I've got a brand new book. It's called The Battles That We All Face. This book is designed to give you encouragement. It's designed to give you hope. It's designed to teach you, to challenge you, to get you to think a little bit more. The full title is The Battles We All Face, a devotional with a difference. Because I don't want you to just read it from start to finish. I want you to take time over this. I want you to read the first chapter and really process it. This book is designed, if nothing more, as I said, to challenge you, to encourage you, to give you hope, but ultimately to let you know that whatever you're facing, you, my friend, are not alone. I want to encourage you right now to not let fear or the past stop you from living an amazing, amazing life. Each page in this book has one of my art pieces in and has been specifically placed there to give you, the reader, an association to the subject discussed. Please don't delay. You owe it to yourself to start rebuilding your life. Life is not over until you draw your last. Don't delay. Order today. Life is short. You owe it to yourself, as long as you're drawing breath, to stand up and fight for the things that you want in life. And my friend, you've got an ally in me who understands completely what you're going through. Have an awesome day. Click that link below, and I'll see you on the other side.